The problem with Ron DeSanctimonious is that he needs a personality transplant, and those are not yet available. You know the expression, I said, he's like a wounded bird falling from the sky. Oh, there he is. It's Ron DeSanctimonious. He's falling beautifully from the sky. It's a beautiful thing to watch. Ron DeSanctimonious was walking off the stage, and his feet, it's weird, because his cowboy boots. So they have a high heel outside, but inside you got a big deal going on. And he's walking like... No, he's walking off the stage like he's trying to balance himself. I thought he was wearing ice skates.
He's like a wounded bird falling from the sky. After spending the better part of the past year being publicly mocked and humiliated by Donald Trump on the campaign trail, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis appears to be ready to grovel at the feet of his former primary rival. Trump and DeSantis met privately in Florida this weekend to bury the hatchet and talk about how they can work together ahead of the November election. For Trump, the truce appears to be purely for financial reasons. According to the Washington Post, Trump's advisors hope DeSantis will tap his donor network to help raise significant sums of money, because as we all know, Trump really needs it. While DeSantis is apparently just looking out for his own political future. And if history has any indication, it's now only a matter of time before DeSantis, or DeSanctimonious, or whatever he's calling himself now, probably because Trump wants him to, adds his name to the long list of Republicans who went from challenging or opposing Trump to publicly degrading themselves on his behalf, joining the likes of Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, and Tim Scott. Joining me now is Matthew Dowd, former Republican strategist and MSNBC senior political analyst. What's the over-under on how long till Ron DeSantis starts calling himself Ron DeSanctimonious?
I don't know that over-under on whether he's going to apply the label, but what's the over-under on how quickly he's out there campaigning for Donald Trump? My guess is 5 days.
Yeah, a few days.
Yeah. In the course of this. And you could add in your list of people that have groveled. Marco Rubio is also on that list of people that have groveled in the course of this. I mean, what's amazing to me, this is a political party, the Republicans, that have run on this constant strength of manhood, and we're the party of strength, and this is who we are. Nobody's going to tell us what to do. And they're the weakest people with a lack of moral fiber of any I've ever seen in the course of this. I guess they have no sense of themselves or no sense of pride in their own thing. They're willing to do whatever it takes. I don't get what it gets them, but I think at this point, and maybe we'll talk about this thing in the next segment as well, is one of the benefits that Donald Trump has provided America is he's the great revealer. Mm-hmm. And what Donald Trump has done, in not only in America as a whole, and revealed what we need to fix in our country and all of the things that we need to fix, he's revealed people's true character.
Indeed.
That's what he fundamentally revealed. He's revealed Bill Barr's character. He's revealed Marco Rubio's character. He's revealed all these people's fundamental true character. And actually, that's a benefit, so we can see who they really are.
It's a parade of beta males. Here's Bill Barr, then versus now.
In that context, I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was.
You're voting for someone who you believe tried to subvert the peaceful transfer of power, that can't even achieve his own policies, that lied about the election even after his attorney general told him that the election wasn't stolen. And as the former chief law enforcement in this country, you're going to vote for someone who is facing 88 criminal counts.
Well, look, the 88 criminal counts, a lot of those are, and I've said...
Even if 10 of them are accurate?
The answer to the question is yes.
Beta male number 2, Lindsey Graham. In 2016, he said, if we nominate Trump, we'll get destroyed, and we deserve it. Here's him now.
If he is convicted, you will still support him and vote for him?
Absolutely. I think what's going on with Donald Trump is weaponization of the law. He's being prosecuted in Manhattan, one of the deepest blue cities in the country.
And beta male number 3, J.D. Vance. He compared Donald Trump to Hitler. In a text to his former roommate, he wrote, I go back and forth between thinking Trump might be a cynical a-hole like Nixon, who wouldn't be that bad, or he might be America's Hitler. He has also called Trump loathsome and an idiot. And now here is J.D. Vance this past Sunday on Fox.
I was wrong. I didn't think he would be a good president. He was a great president. That's not about, sinking to political degradation. That's looking at reality and recognizing that Donald Trump was a success.
Is this just that they were sort of always betas who were faking alpha, or is it capitulation because they think he'll be an autocrat and they want to get, they want to supplicate themselves before him in advance because they're afraid of him and what he might do with his authority when he gets back in, if he gets back in?
Can I answer yes to both of those? Because I think being a beta male, and that's who you always are, is also one of the requirements of submitting to an autocrat and not standing up to him. And so they basically are the same thing in the course of this. I also think what it says is these people, no matter what they have lectured other people on about America or faith or religion or whatever, have no core moral principles, have zero core moral. And that's what we've discovered in this. All the things they repeat out there for crowds and quoting the Bible and all the thing about being honest and truthful and all that is all a big lie. There was never something they fundamentally believed. They only said it because they thought it would benefit them politically. And now in this case, they're doing the exact same thing, which is going along with Donald Trump because they think it's going to benefit them politically. So yes, to both your questions, they are both that, but they have no moral sense.
Well, they're also beta females as well, and I think the thing that people don't understand is that Donald Trump despises these people. He reportedly is sick of Kari Lake already. He doesn't respect any of these people. He despises them because of their weakness and their capitulation. Really quick, your quick thoughts.
Well, I think he despises them the same way he despises his own voters.
Absolutely,
his own voters. He 1,000%. Has no care about. He would not hang out with them if he wasn't at a crowd and all that. He despises them, even though he constantly says he's their advocate. He despises them. He despises the elected officials, and he despises the voters.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about one more of them on the other side of the break. Matthew Dowd is going to stick with us because somehow Kristi Noem, speaking of beta females, is doubling down on her alpha decision to kill her dog.